right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Go TiNY San Diego, talking to homeowners in San Diego who are interested in placing a small home on their property, whether it be on wheels or foundation, but we are definitely going to be focusing on the wheels because this is the beauty of this ordinance that got passed in San Diego like a couple years ago. We have a slide about that. And I want to thank Ellen for being there for the last event that we had scheduled in April that didn't quite work out for a variety of reasons. And you took great questions from the people. So I've got a list of those questions. What we'll do is we'll dive into the presentation and then we'll add the list of questions that we got from that session that you actually had with people. We had about, I would say, 9 different questions, which are really good, well-informed, and we'll include them into the live Q&A at the end of our presentation. Do you want to go around and just share who you are and your organization? I'll go, and then Ellen, then Genny, and if Harvey's, I see Harvey. So I'm Lindsay, the tiny home lady. I offer consulting and education in the tiny home space.
I'm Ellen Stone with Tiny Home Central, and we're working on projects to bring movable tiny homes to people's lives in reality. So not just on social media, but real world applications. Good to be here.
Hi, I'm Genny Crane with Rebuilding Green, also American Tiny House Association and Tiny House Industry Association. And I'm all about tiny home communities. I love the tiny homes in the backyards, but I really rather, and we are going there, but I am much more excited about really making an impact with tiny home communities.
And my favorite part about Genny is she created the coolest nonprofit / dealer, which is not a common thing, named Rebuilding Green. So I just put the website in there. And if you, Ellen, you want to put your own sites in, that'd be great. Contact information.
Hello, my name is Harvey Hardwick. I work alongside Genny Crane with Rebuilding Green. I handle a lot of the permitting and property assessments for our nonprofit.
The super easy stuff.
Yeah.
We laugh. He's tackled it. I've seen him evolve. I've watched it personally. It's amazing. Quick little story. I was in the office when he was pointing out that someone he was talking to thought they lived in the county, but they lived literally across the street in the city of Vista, like literally across the street. So close, but you know, and they couldn't do what they wanted to do based on the fact that the jurisdiction they were in. So Harvey's knowledge and education around all that, you know, happens on the actual physical things, so important. And then Raquel, I want you to share yourself. You know, you're not just an attendee. We know who you are. Come out and share who you are, what your organization is, and what you do.
Hi. So yes, we are a builder in San Diego, and we're a big advocate for what everyone here is doing. This is our goal. So it's so frustrating with it not being, over 2 years. You guys might have already said this, but yeah, I mean, over 2 years and we still can't get any permits passed. Very frustrating. So I am here to help with that and advocate.
Thank you. Super awesome. And she's with Custom Casitas, and that's her link there.
Oh, yeah.
The beautiful butterfly behind her is one of the many amazing models. And there's a relationship between Genny Crane, Rebuilding Green, and Custom Casitas as the dealer and manufacturer. And I think some more, when I saw some of the questions that were in the list, more of that will be revealed as to understanding that, relationship. Very excited to be representing the American Tiny House Association. It's a group that has evolved over the years, very much focused on advocacy and developing standards and membership and all that for many, many years. In fact, Genny and Ellen could probably speak closer to the early years. But then there's been a transformation that really, by owning or at least being legally declared as a 501c3, the work they were doing to advocate and work with elected officials to encourage new adoption of ordinances and all that really was better suited by the Tiny Home Industry Association. However, ATHA, as they know for short, ATHA and THA, really became more about how can we put more homes in places that the Tiny Home Industry Association and the people that are working hard, like Dan Fitzpatrick, Brad, we've got a number of people inside, so I won't say all of that group, but that whole Tiny Home Industry Association group, which Genny is also a board member of, can really usher in a new ordinance, new legislation, because they are a 501c6. So there was something to the whole 501c3, a nonprofit for charity, and a 501c6 nonprofit, but not for charity. And so that two kind of partnerships, they're still very much partnered, but THEA, think of them as legalizing tiny, the ones leading out, doing the ordinance, working with the elected officials. And ATHA is really evolving itself, and very much with this Go Tiny campaign. There's a lot of places where THEA has already gotten legalization, but there's lack of education. What does the ordinance mean? You know, just because a city passes something doesn't mean that everybody knows about it. In fact, I was just talking to my dear friends in Santa Cruz. No clue that recent things have passed in actual Santa Cruz County. So there's a big opportunity for education, and that's really what the Go Tiny campaign is all about. So think about Go Tiny San Diego, Go Tiny Los Angeles, Go Tiny San Luis Obispo. There's a lot of places here in California. We've also got Go Tiny Portland. There's a number of those cities and counties, and then soon states, that may have passed something, but wasn't, you know, might have gotten a blip in the press, and that was it, right? It's not the job of the city to go and market to the industry what's unique and different. And that's why we put together this amazing cast, because I won't have the same group of people in all these other locations, but San Diego was the best place to start this, because there's been advocates doing the hard lifting, the educating of elected officials, getting things passed, putting some feet to the fire, picking up the phone calls, getting the government officials inside tiny homes to really make sure that, you know, they knew what was available with this awesome opportunity of affordable housing using tiny homes on wheels, movable tiny homes, and all the like. Today I have here with me Genny Crane with Rebuilding Green, Harvey Hardwick with Rebuilding Green, and also Ellen Stone, Tiny Home Central. You know, they're like my like tiny home besties in business, but also my dear friends. And I'm so honored to call them my friends, because I've learned so much from each of them. I will move on to the topic number one. What is an ADU? ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. It is that accessory to a single family home. I will say not every state in the nation has something approved statewide, but California is unique in the sense that it does. So when we talk about anywhere in the state, the accessory dwelling unit is allowed. So often thought of as, you know, on a secondary housing unit in the backyard detached. But here's some pictures, right? There's a detached, attached, you know, you can change out the garages, you can do all kinds of things, whether it gets into like a junior accessory dwelling unit, which is more attached, or a detached ADU. One of my friends up in Oregon, Cole Peterson, came up with 69 names for the ADU. Laneway house, cottage, mother-in-law. There's a number of, you know, the casita, right? We got the casita. And so on and on and on, but really what it means is that it's another housing unit on the property, and typically smaller than the main home, up to 50% of the square footage. A lot of changes have been made. What's unique about San Diego, you can do multiple ADUs in the backyard, as long as you're going to meet, you know, setbacks and allowance for utilities, water systems, sewer systems, all of that. We're not going to really dive into all those kind of details today. There's other services for that, like what Harvey provides. But, you know, we want to kind of give more of a high level and then really dive into the ordinance that got passed. Oftentimes they've been built on site. However, that has increased the cost and the time. Because if you think about it, you're like, okay, I want to start my project. You go and initiate the plans, you wait for the inspector to come out, then you start building, then they come out again and again and again and again, hoping that there's no delays. Then you got San Diego Gas and Electric coming out and all the people having to come to the site, versus something built off-site. And that is the big game changer in this industry. That's what I call the small home movement, whether people call it tiny homes, small homes, tiny homes on wheels, movable tiny homes. We actually have a lot of verbiage out there. It's just adding more property, more livable space to your property, whether that's attached or detached, whether that's on permanent foundation or whether that's on wheels. But the unique part about this that we're talking about tonight is the fact that it's on the wheels. We'll talk about that in a moment. The benefits of adding a smaller home on your property. I could probably have, I don't know, how about you guys? While I'm sharing, what is your main reason? Is it for family, right? Like these people right here? Is it grandma and grandpa owns the big house and then this family wants to live in the backyard? Or maybe this family needs to live in the bigger home and mom and dad are downsizing? Is it to offer somewhere to rent? And now you're able to help pay for the mortgage. So many people having to like look at these high costs of living, especially in the San Diego area. An ADU can be a wonderful opportunity to add something to your land to offer as a rental income. It can be very interchangeable, right? Like those scenarios, it could be a rental right away. And then when mom and dad want to like downsize and move into that space, or vice versa, the family that wants to travel, I need to save for retirement. What are your reasons? Like, what is the biggest reason? Because I can share what I hear in front of audiences because I speak about this for the last 6 years now. I know Genny's spoken about it. You know, we often get kind of a commonality of theme, and I don't want to like break the news yet. So anyone want to put in the chat? I know I saw the word rent there, rent space to tiny home friends, community. Yes, Genny. A lot of people, whether that's your like immediate family community or your, you know, self-appointed, this is my community. Rent community now, in-laws later. Perfect. Yeah, I love the flexibility of that. A big one for me and my husband, home ownership. Home ownership was one of the biggest reasons why we went tiny. And another part of it is that because we wanted the wheels, we also wanted to be travel ready. We have moved, I haven't counted how many places, but we did 10,000 miles, drove from California to Texas. So that was a lot of places. We are now in Arizona. The home was in San Diego before that. It was in Northern California before that. So, you know, it's movable. That's the beautiful thing for what we wanted. And that is probably the biggest reason why people want the wheels. They want to be able to move it. And yeah, there you go, Regina. Affordability, wealth building, retirement, movability. Absolutely. So these are the main benefits. Many more come into there. I did a whole research project where we asked one question, why do you want to go tiny? And it really came down to those four: the wealth and the home ownership building, the sustainability was another factor, downsizing, simplicity, and also travel, the ability to like be portable for our, you know, medical professionals, digital nomads, people that want to like try a different location around the country. Great opportunity. Even the world, actually. These can go on ships, because I know one builder that actually gets them shipped in from Bosnia. Tiny home on wheels or foundation. This is a quick kind of sketch to really talk about the wheels are really anything built on wheels, just like a car, a tiny home on wheels, or an RV. They're known as personal property. And tiny homes on permanent foundation are considered real property. They can still be built in a factory, arrive on wheels, and then taken off and put on foundation. Now, the building standard for which you're building to is going to determine which is going to be the case. If you're building to more of an RV standard, either the NFPA or ANSI, that's going to be a personal property. If you're building to a residential building code called International Residential Code, or in our state, California Building Code, then it's going to be built in a factory, arrives on wheels, placed on foundation, and now that is a permanent foundation as if it was built on site. The beautiful part, like I was describing before, that can take a long time given all the points that you need to get inspectors and the permits. What if you're actually doing your permitting, your foundation installation, while at the same time your home is being built? That shrinks the time frame. That is the value add that gets to be added to this whole conversation about offsite building. And that is going to be the game changer for how we build ourselves out of this housing crisis and also climate crisis, because housing is a big contributor of greenhouse gases. So really just the difference is coming down to, like, if movability is really important, you know, let's say someone puts something on a backyard that they don't own, but they're there for a few years, then you want to own the property and be able to move it. That is a really good case for the wheels. If you're in a location where the wheels are not allowed, and we'll be talking more about this ordinance next, then you might want to consider something built in a factory, arrives on wheels, and built to either an IRC or a HUD standard, because both of those can be built elsewhere, brought on wheels, and then placed as real property. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me just see. Oh, the International Residential Code. So I know there's a lot of terminology. I'll just share international. I don't know why I'm not able to type here. Oh, here we go. IRC. And we call it the California Building Code, CBC. And really there's a Title 24, which gets involved in, that will dictate how thick your walls need to be, what kind of installation, if we're going to need to have sprinkler systems because you're in the wilderness urban interface, metal structures versus wood. There's a number of host of reasons why California is known for one of the strictest building codes because of our efficiency demands. Hopefully I've shared with you enough about the personal versus the real, wheels versus foundation. And just a little note, when you hear the word tiny home, that is a marketing term. There is no specific building standard currently that is coming for a tiny home. So if you were to pick up the phone and go, hi, I'd like a tiny home permit, most likely it's going to be a permit for something like an ANSI, which would work in San Diego. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to turn this over to Ellen to give us this wonderful timeline, because I was not around in 2018, and I want to give the baton over to the people that were there in the trenches, had the vision and made it happen and brought us up through all this awesome, possibility. Ellen.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's pretty cool how far we've come. We also have a little ways to go, right? But just want to fill you in on what we've been up to here locally. So in 2018, so there were a few things happening in 2017, but in 2018, a few of us met and were introduced to leadership of the American Tiny House Association and invited them to come give a presentation here in San Diego, where we had 30 members that were interested in creating something locally. So we started having meetings and organizing, and actually brought Tiny Fest to San Diego in 2020, right before everything shut down. We were so lucky that we got in right under the radar. And so we hosted the local chapter of the American Tiny House Association, San Diego chapter, hosted a symposium, which Genny Crane found a really great way to kind of market the whole thing with Tiny Now as our campaign. And that's where Lindsay saw was wowed by all of our volunteers at that event. It really, I think, did lead the way to getting the ordinance passed within the city of San Diego later that year. We had one of the council members, Scott Sherman from District 7, who came and presented at that symposium. And so I think, him and his staff kept that alive, had that ordinance passed in 2020. And then now I do have an update to this slide. So there's actually 2 movable tiny houses approved. So one of those is in my husband and I's backyard, and another one is in Claremont. There was another permit that was pulled, but they didn't move forward with it. So that's where we are now. There's been a lot of really great press around the ideas, but there's still a lot of education needed for people to understand what's possible. So we're just really glad to be having you all here to learn about what you can do related to movable tiny homes on your property or partnering with someone who has a property.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Really appreciate that. And there are other homes out there that get placed under the radar, meaning they didn't go and get a permit. And a lot of questions I ask people, my top questions, are you wanting to get a permit and do it in the eyes and legal? None of us are here are permit police, so you do you, boo, right? But we do want to educate people on the chances of the fact that if you do something and someone complains, then you can be red tagged, and then there's a lot of investment that goes into things. And I would say I get probably like 0.1% of my people that say, I can do whatever I want. So there are more homes in San Diego. Quick note, did you guys all know that there are 100,000 homes that are needed in the next 6 years? That's rare. If we were to times that by 2,500 square feet, which is the average home in America, that's 250 million square feet. Where do you, living in that area, see 250 million square feet of housing? It doesn't exist. Like, you've got to do roads and utilities and fire and all the things. So we need more housing solutions, and tiny homes are 100% a viable solution. And now I'd like to turn it over to my dear friend, Genny Crane, who taught me pretty much everything that I need to know about the world of ANSI and building standards and HUD and all those kind of things. So Genny Crane, take it away.
Thank you, Lindsay. So I'm going to take you a little bit back by showing you a video. So I'm going to take you a little bit back in Tiny World, even though it's not that far back, but it's a video thing that LA did where they are adding the movable tiny into the ADU ordinance as an ADU type. And so even though it took Los Angeles about 3 years to go through the process, San Diego's actually been moving pretty fast. Here in April of this year, it went to Planning Commission. And then once again, unanimously, Planning Commission voted, yes. And so actually, we're very excited because today is actually a very important day for the movable tiny here in San Diego. And the city council is going to be voting to either approve it or to not approve it.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move that motion, and unless any council members want to correct their supporting this, we'll go ahead and move forward with the unanimous support on this. Thank you. Thank you.
July 21st, 2020, the city of San Diego approved the movable tiny home under the ADU, aka Companion Unit Ordinance. Stay tuned to find out what the other San Diego jurisdictions will do, or better yet, how will the state of California respond to this true affordable housing solution?
Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you because you kind of felt the excitement that we felt back in 2020. And as Ellen mentioned about COVID. So right as COVID was starting Tiny Fest, we literally started to see the first people wear their mask, and we were laughing at them like, what are they doing? And then boom, the whole country was shut down. So since then, the voice that you heard there, you guys are going to get familiar with that voice because Harvey's going to be coming up pretty shortly, but that was his voice. We're very excited about the tiny home being approved in the city of San Diego. And since then, crickets. We haven't had any extra activity go on in San Diego. Although, even though we haven't had activity in San Diego, out of the 482 jurisdictions in the whole state of California, the last time I knew, and I'm pretty much involved in this space a lot. However, as we've been going, we'll hear other jurisdictions that we might have talked to 2-3 years ago move forward. So as I know, the latest was 17 jurisdictions of the 482 jurisdictions. So as you can see, we have a lot of work ahead of us. And so we're excited to have you all here today The next thing that I'm going to share with you is I'm going to go over and, all right, so I'm going to share a little presentation that I did at the TiNY Fest. Can you see my screen? We're really excited to be in this space. We've been in this space for like 9 years now, and we are now, we're helping with ordinances, but we also have done several communities, and we're still doing communities. And so we're really excited, as I mentioned in the beginning, that my favorite thing is the communities. So I'm just going to give you a view on what's going on in the state. And so I'm probably not saying anything new, but just to kind of reiterate, we all know that we're in different times where we got 50% of adults that are single. The older population's the fastest growing homeless population. The biggest divorces that are happening are with the baby boomers or our seniors. So, I mean, the thing is, bottom line is, tiny homes work. It makes a lot of sense. If there's so many single people, do we really need the big houses? No, we don't really need the big houses anymore. You've seen that we kind of were fed a lie, or we were involved in it. So we went along with the bigger is better dream, and bigger has proven not to be better. We've actually seen our families decrease, even though the houses increased. So it used to be back in these days, the Little House on the Prairie days, where you had the bigger families and the smaller houses, and now things are all screwed up. But we're going back, and here in San Diego, we actually, at our San Diego chapter, we used to do a tour with North Park, and it was a really cool tour where I don't know if they still do that anymore, Ellen, but we did it. It was really cool, where you can actually walk through North Park and see a whole bunch of tiny home communities, whether they call them pocket neighborhoods or bungalow courts or cottage courts. We have these. So it's not like tiny homes are anything new. This is in North Park, where it's like a little community. The homes, I think, were like 400 to 500 square feet. So that's a tiny home. So even yourselves, take a drive through North Park, you're going to see that tiny home communities is nothing new. It's been there for a long time. We're just kind of going back, and we need to go back because we need housing. And so this is just a little slide that I have about the history of homes on wheels, but I won't get into that. But anyone want to guess, without looking here, because you probably can't see it anyway because it's so small, what the first tiny home on wheels was? It was the horse carriage. So it was a house on wheels, right? So this actually is a slide that I go through, like, the history of homes on wheels. So again, we're doing nothing new. We're just kind of going back to things that we already know. And then we bump into the tiny home movement. This Yahoo article was back in 2021 saying that it's an up and coming $3.33 billion industry. So it's if you're in it for trying to make a living, you're in a good space, because we're recession proof over here. Okay, so nationwide, I'm just going to go through just really quickly. Things have definitely changed. I know when I first got into this space, I thought I was going to start at the top, where we can jump right into communities. I was wrong. Lindsay was right. Tiny home is not an actual name of a structure or a standard. It used to get you in a lot of trouble if you tried to say tiny home at the building department. They would shut you down very quick. And so we've come a long way since then, because it used to be like, what is it? Is it a car? Is it a home? But we all know in the tiny home space that have been in tiny homes, that is not an RV. It's not a car. It's actually a home. People actually can live in a tiny home. So in the nation, where we're at is we do have a few state bills that are going. And I was in one of our board meetings on May the 3rd, and we were at the very last final comment stage in Colorado. And so if you've kind of been following, what happens is you'll have a jurisdiction like what we were showing in that video. LA was known as the big elephant, and once the big elephant went, then a lot of other jurisdictions were like, okay, well, what did LA do? And they'll just take their ordinance and use that same ordinance, to legalize it in their municipality. So the same thing is going to be happening in the States. And we're very excited about it, because we have been part of a bill that was written here right in California that we took down, and we're hoping one day we'll get brave and take it back up and try to get the that bill approved, but because of states like Colorado and Florida and Massachusetts already are in the process, I think Colorado, they had their final comments, so that could very well already be passed at this point. I wanted to make, I was going to try to make a call today before we got into this, but because of that, we believe that there's probably going to be maybe like 13 states that are going to follow suit after Colorado. So then it's going to be the same type of scenario where they, kind of copy that ordinance and make it another, use that as the state bill so that they don't have to rewrite that particular bill. But so that's what's going on in the state right now, and it's pretty exciting. And we do have ICC support. ICC and THEA have pretty much partnered, and there's a lot going there. THEA is Tiny House Industry Association. They are the ones behind the scenes that are making it happen. Dan Fitzpatrick, some of you may have seen him speak, but if you are not already a member of THEA, I highly suggest, if you're into the tiny home world, to become a member. It's one of the cheapest memberships with the biggest value that you'll ever find, I believe. So that's just a real quick plug for THEA. Okay, so this is the current outlook. This is really the nuts and bolts of what I was wanting to get into. So I had mentioned a little earlier of the 482 jurisdictions, we only had 17, but this just goes to show you I think there was 13 in 2022. Again, I used this presentation at the Tiny Fest recently, so I wanted to just show, the difference of what one year does. And so in 2022, that's where we're at. In 2023, we went to 17. So even though 482 is a long way off, the good news is that the major cities, LA, San Jose, San Diego, the ones that have the highest populations are the ones that have approved the movable tiny home. So that is great news. So we have the city of Fresno, and this is one thing that is really important. It'd be great one day to all have one name to make it easy. But unfortunately, I think we all know that we're not, everything seems to always be a little bit more difficult. So tiny homes have different names in every single different jurisdiction. So one jurisdiction like Fresno calls them backyard cottages, whereas the city of San Jose calls it tiny home on wheels. City of San Diego is a movable tiny house. And so in San Diego County, we only technically have 2 jurisdictions of the 19 that are okay with a movable tiny home in some capacity. So in the city of San Diego, which is the largest jurisdiction of the 19 jurisdictions in San Diego, we originally got it approved as an ADU type, which would have been wonderful. And in the space that we're in, that is like our number one goal, is to, have, because of the ADU laws really, really opened the door for the tiny home movement. I call an ADU a permanent tiny home, right? Because it really is a tiny home. And so the best way to go about it, if some of you are here to, really become advocates yourself to advocate for tiny homes, the best way to go about it is just to make it an ADU type. So we tried to do that in the city of San Diego. The very end, it did get approved, but then it got kicked back. We had some haters for our industry, or just people that weren't really on board at that time with a movable tiny home as an ADU. So we got kicked back. I mean, we still are able to get the movable tiny home approved. There's some changes that would be great if we can make them, and we're attempting to do that right now with like setbacks. But moving past city of San Diego, so in the county has for at least a decade had a permit that's the easiest permit in the world. We love it. It's called the healthcare permit. And so the healthcare permit has been in place for folks that are able to get a doctor's note, and it's not like a doctor's note that is asking for all kinds of medical records. It's literally a 3-liner where a doctor can come in and sign. We've seen doctors even put one word, arthritis, and sign it. And so a person is able to live in the backyard of a family member with the healthcare permit. And it's not only just for seniors. We've actually been able to get a couple other young folks into a healthcare permit for other reasons, even for mental health reasons as well. And so in the city of Los Angeles, they call it a movable tiny house. The county of Humboldt, tiny house and movable tiny house. City of San Luis Obispo, movable tiny house. County of Sonoma, caregiver unit. The county of Sonoma and San Diego County are the only ones that have that caregiver type unit, which is an awesome thing. We're hoping that one day maybe we can get a state bill going in that direction that will really help a lot of our elderly, to live the end of their lives in a quality situation where they're near family, and then also not have to pay as much in senior facilities. California City, tiny home, County of Santa Clara, movable tiny home. You get the idea. So again, in every single jurisdiction, they not only call it something different, but they also have different rules. And so again, it would be nice one day to try to make it a little bit different where maybe we can have it be called the same thing. And so that is why I mentioned the AB 2430 here, is because that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to make it an ADU type across the board. So we need help though, as we've mentioned. There was a lot of work that went into helping the city to see the whole movable tiny home as a solution for our affordability problems. And it's very unfortunate that we haven't had more people take advantage of that. Again, there are some issues that we believe could be addressed where it would open the door, like setbacks. So right now, the setback for a movable tiny home from the existing structure is 10 feet. So if we would have gotten it in as an ADU, like we originally had gotten it approved, then it would only be a 4-foot setback. Is it 4 or 5 feet, Harvey?
For a movable tiny?
Yeah.
Well, it really depends. The movable tiny has to adhere in the city of San Diego. It has to adhere to the setbacks that are set forth for the, say, single family residence or the multifamily lot. But so if your rear for a movable tiny is 8 feet, you have to adhere to that. Whereas an ADU, it's 4 feet. Side is 4 feet.
Okay.
So
Thank you. Sorry, I
Yeah.
threw him in. He's going to talk in a second, but Harvey's like right here with me. So I'm always like grabbing at him all the time. So anyway, again, if some of you are interested in helping in the advocacy efforts, going the movable tiny home as an ADU type is the way to go, because like the example in city of San Diego, we believe that if we were able to have had it stay as a ADU type, then we would have had a lot more applications that would have been able to go through, because in the city, the properties are not as big as places like in the county where the land is bigger. So here are a few standouts that I like to mention, even though, I mentioned there's 17, these are some of the standouts, but there's other ones that are in the talks. So some of them that are in the talks is Mendocino, County of Sacramento, City of Sacramento, City of West Sacramento, San Diego County. Actually, San Diego County is actually looking at not just, the healthcare unit that's going to stay, but also getting the movable tiny as or approving a movable tiny not only as a backyard unit, but they're also looking at small lot development, which is very exciting for people that are in the county. Another jurisdiction that's in the talks is Citrus Heights, and then Redding, Shasta, Mariposa, and Tuolumne. So it's happening. It really is happening right now. Those are just some of the most recent as of May 3rd. And so in Fort Bragg, you can put 2 tinies on a single family lot. In South Lake Tahoe and San Luis Obispo, it can be an ADU. In Ojai, San Jose, Los Angeles, they're considered ADUs. They have it a little easier there. We talked about the healthcare units in Sonoma and the County of San Diego. Riverside is also tiny friendly, and they're calling them MADUs, MADU, MADU. And then the City of San Diego movable tiny homes. So those are just some of the standouts. we just talked about that for the healthcare permit for San Diego. Tiny home zones. So tiny home zone is just something that we coined. There's not actually any jurisdictions that are calling them tiny home zones yet, but it's just like what I had mentioned about movable tiny homes and how they have different names. So tiny home zone to us is just something that we've used to say, hey, they're tiny friendly and they're allowing, tiny homes in that area, whether it be a village, a planned unit development, cluster development, small lot development. So if you hear that term tiny home zone within our own group here, that's what we're talking about. So these are some of the highlights. Santa Cruz calls them tiny home villages or planned unit developments. Oakland allows you to have 3 movable tiny homes on there. So we kind of feel like that's kind of a little community in itself. County of San Diego, I mentioned that they are looking at small lot development to allow, communities of tiny homes. LA County, they actually do allow them, but they require the creation of an HOA with the development. And Placer County calls them cluster development. Okay, and so I'm just going to talk a little bit about finance, and then I'll be done with my little section here. So really exciting. And this is actually a loan that has been in place for decades, actually. And one of the, as a dealer, Rebuilding Green, we are an approved retailer for 21st Mortgage, which is like the largest lender for manufactured homes. So, again, they've been doing these types of loans for a long time. They're called chattel loans. So what is a chattel loan? A chattel loan is something where you can actually own the unit and not the land. So of course, because these loans have been around for a long time with 21st Mortgage, they've been doing them in parks. And so what this has opened the door for is what I call smart backyards. And so a smart backyard is a yard that's not doing anything, but if it wants to become smart, it would allow a movable tiny home resident to put their home in their backyard and lease it. So that these loans actually are in place, and that would allow that to be a reality for a lot of people. And because we're like boots on the ground, we talk to a lot of folks every single month. And, if there were more jurisdictions on board, we'd be able to place a lot more people into backyards just with this type of financing. And so they actually allow 25-year terms. So it really extends out that payment so you can be an affordable payment. So that's all I got for now. And again, thank you all for your time. And I can put my contact information in the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Awesome, Genny. Thank you so much.
So we have an event coming up. You heard Genny talk about smart backyards. We want to start organizing an event for smart backyards. As you can see here, we only have one of all of those municipalities. Please help us turn them all orange. The planning meeting where we'll be setting up all of our planning around the smart backyard tiny house backyard tours is on June 23rd from 12 to 1 p.m. Email me. I put my email address in the chat if you'd like to attend. And then I also want to give you guys the link again. There we go. If you're interested in joining our and being part of our team, we'd love to have you. So with that being said, I'll pass it back to Harvey. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks for all your work.
Go team, go.
Go team, go. All right. So Harvey, share with us the good news of how easy it is to figure out how to place a tiny home.
Oh, it's so easy. If you just want one, just throw one in your backyard, guys. All right. Have a nice day. I wish it was that easy. Again, my name is Harvey Hardwick. I've been with Rebuilding Green now for approximately 3 years, and spend the majority of my time assessing the land and determining what can be done on the parcel. And then on the permitting side, packaging the deal and getting it submitted and working through that particular jurisdiction. And one of the things about permitting I want to mention at the onset is that, you know, we're talking about all of these different jurisdictions, and what I've found in working with jurisdictions throughout the country is that none of them are the same. And so I believe I heard Dominique say that you're in Riverside, if that's correct. Are you in the city or the county?
I mainly deal with county.
Okay, and so as Genny mentioned, the city of Riverside allows movable tinies now, but the county does not. So, and that's the same thing here in the city of San Diego. The city of San Diego allows movable tinies, but the county currently does not, and nor does the other remaining jurisdictions in San Diego County. So you have to really understand where you reside and what your jurisdiction allows, whether it's for a manufactured home that people utilize as an ADU or a movable tiny. I know that there were a few definitions of movable tiny homes, but one of the things I want to point out, and I think it makes it very easy to distinguish between a movable tiny home and a manufactured home that might be utilized as an ADU, is on a movable tiny home, there's a license plate. Okay, so if you look on the back or on the trailer there and you see a license plate, you'll know that that is a movable tiny home and would have to adhere to, if it's the city of San Diego, adhere to whatever rules are associated with movable tiny homes. Let me see here. I had a list of information here defining movable tiny homes, but I've already heard many of them already mentioned. But one of the things that I've seen working here at Rebuilding Green that's very exciting is that I've seen a lot of folks that really could not afford to live in a regular size, normal size, if you will, home, find a home with a tiny home and be able to, you know, remain in the city and be around their friends and loved ones. So that's been one of the more fulfilling things that I've seen with tiny homes, being able to help so many people, whether it be the dilapidated trailer parks that we've been able to convert and put people in that, or as we are working on now is another project where we're helping kids age out of foster care and be able to utilize these tiny homes as a way to help more individuals. So, but through that, being able to now help everyone with putting a tiny home on their property is something that I'm spending a lot of time doing assessments for. So that's where I want to begin with permitting. The first thing I think you should do, even prior to permitting, is a pre-assessment. You need to understand what you can do on your property. I know we have Tiny Fest, we have a lot of these events, and there's these incredible tiny homes being developed everywhere. However, what many people are finding out is that you can't place all of them in your backyard. You really need to understand, when I talk about assessments, I'm basically talking about very simple things like, where are your utilities located on your property? How are you going to connect to them? What are your setbacks? Rear, just like I mentioned earlier, for a movable tiny home in the city of San Diego, you have to adhere to your setbacks, whereas throughout the state for ADUs, it's 4 feet at the rear and 4 feet at the sides. Now, there are some nuances there, and I'm not going to get into every nuance when it comes to setbacks, but for the most part, setbacks 4 feet at the rear. You can't place a movable tiny home in your front yard in the city of San Diego. They don't allow you to be within the front yard setbacks. So with the pre-assessment, this is just simply to determine what you can do. The setbacks, you just really want to understand what your jurisdiction requires for these simple things when it comes to the pre-assessment. So the setbacks, you want to understand that. And then you want to understand how you're going to connect into your utilities. And with movable tiny homes in the city of San Diego, natural gas is prohibited, so you have to be 100% electric. So you want to know how you're going to connect into your electric, your water, and then when it comes to sewer and septic, depending on where if you're using a healthcare unit and you're in the county, you can connect into septic. But within the city, you're going to have to connect into your sewer. So you're going to want to know where all of that is. And then what is the impact on, what does that impact on in terms of cost and making sure that you can connect into the movable tiny. The other thing I want to mention is accessibility. A lot of folks don't think about accessibility until it's too late. You need to know how you're going to get that unit into your backyard or into your side yard. Are you going to need a crane? If you have no room, I mean, we've all seen the houses that are right next to each other. There's no way a 12-foot or 11-foot or 8.5-foot wide unit is going to be able to fit into the side. So they're going to have to go over the top. So you're going to want to make sure you think about the accessibility. One of the other differences here in the city of San Diego is that if you have an ADU and and the main house doesn't have sprinklers, you don't need to have sprinklers in your ADU. However, if you're in any type of fire zone and you have a movable tiny, you have to have sprinklers. So your pre-assessment, you want to think about your setbacks, how you're going to connect to utilities, accessibility. That's generally what I do when I go out first. And then once you have that information, you now can pretty much determine what type of unit you're going to place into your backyard. And then getting right into permitting, like I was saying earlier, each jurisdiction has different rules. So you want to make sure you understand what your jurisdiction is going to require for your submittal package. Generally, it's going to be your application, your site plan. You're going to need the plans for the unit that you're going to be placing in your backyard. Now, after that, there are some nuanced requirements depending on your jurisdiction, but in the city of San Diego, that's primarily it. I mean, if you were in a historic zone, you can imagine there's some assessment that needs to take place there. But and then when you get that package together, you will submit that. And when you submit that, it's going to go, your main departments are going to be your planning, your zoning, some sort of environmental health department. Those sort of agencies. Planning is going to make sure your submittal package is all together. Zoning is going to make sure that the allowances are there. What are the setbacks required by that particular jurisdiction? One of the things I want to mention is if you're doing this yourself and you don't understand all these nuanced things as they're related to permitting, that can really lengthen out the time of the entire permitting process. I know that the state says it's going to be 60 days. I haven't seen that in any jurisdiction in San Diego for that. 60 days, 2 months. It's usually around 4 months, and it could go on to 6, 7, 8 months, depending on the situation or how many times you need to resubmit, because you might have to make some changes. It isn't like they tell you need to make some changes and then you update those changes and you just give it to them and they correct it in a day. It might take them 2, 3, 4 weeks to get back to you for some simple changes you need to make. So that's why I would recommend in your jurisdiction, if you can find a resource that handles the submitting of permits, that would probably save you a lot of time and headaches and heartaches if you do that up front. So keep that in mind, because permitting can be complex and require a lot of special compliances and regulations. When it comes to permitting, the zoning, one of the other things you want to pay attention to is there's a lot of rules when it comes to height or design criteria. There are some that require special slopes for your roof. They want you to match the paint from your tiny home to your main house. And so you want to pay attention to whether or not there are any design criteria that you need to pay attention to. And then you just want to make sure that when you're choosing your units, you also want to make sure that it is certified. You want to make sure that you're not purchasing one that doesn't have the appropriate certifications, because in the city of San Diego, they're required to be, a tiny home is required to be ANSI certified. And if it's not, they just won't accept it. So you want to make sure you pay attention to those things, and reiterating this again, finding a qualified permitting source to help you work through that process, as well as I would recommend having someone there for a pre-assessment as well. So that way they can kind of guide you through and save you a few months and a considerable amount of money when it comes to permitting and just putting the whole project together. But that's for the most part, that's about it. I would say that jurisdictions, it changes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to need you can have your submittal package, which includes your site plan, your actual your plans for your unit, your foundation plan, but that's primarily it. And I'm available if anyone has any questions at any time. You can reach out to Rebuilding Green. Lindsay knows how to get a hold of me, and there's a number of folks in here that get a hold of me as well. So thank you.
Awesome, Harvey. Thank you so much. I'm going to share with everyone right before we get into the Q&A. This is my QR code link, but I'm giving everyone the opportunity to schedule a 15-minute tiny home discovery call with me. In the work that you've been doing, are we looking at 10K, 20K to develop a property? Because I've seen at least a minimum of 10,000.
Okay, so there's two parts there. There's the actual permitting, and then you're talking about site development.
Yep.
Costs. Okay, so in the city of San Diego, I've seen it get to be pretty pricey when it comes to, depending on how far water and or sewer is from your house. You can imagine digging up the ground. Or I can tell you, dealing with SDG&E here in San Diego is a nightmare. It takes, simply just to get a planner out there to begin the process, takes nearly 2, possibly 3 months. And that's before they even tell you what to do. That's them just coming out there and analyzing the situation. And so, but when it comes to pricing, I would say you're going to be closer to somewhere around 30. But that ranges. It can go down, 15,000, but it also can go in the other direction, 15,000. So say if you're 30, it can go down to 15. Now, with regard to permitting for a movable tiny, you should be able to get away with permitting a movable tiny well under 5,000. You'll probably be closer to like 3,000 for a movable tiny. And that's just for the permitting, because it is under 500 square feet. You're not going to have to pay school fees. And so there's some things that you're going to be able to not have to worry about. But
one project that I heard about, the sewer line was under the driveway. They weren't too far back, but the whole project cost $40,000.
yes.
So that is something that it really is dependent on your project. I've got some questions already, but I see some. Thank you, Genny, for jumping in there about the lender questions. So Stephanie shares, I'm in 25,000 for permits, $18,000 in studies for water and culture. So thank you, Stephanie, for the real talk, right? All the things that are not just the home. On some level, the home is actually the easiest part because you can get a pretty good quote from a builder. But when you start attaching it to the ground and all of that permit stuff, then that is where having resources like Harvey, it's critical because he's dealt with a lot of this stuff back and forth, both Harvey and Genny. There's one question from Mark. Does San Diego require slabs or gravel pads? That's a really good question. Slab or gravel pads for movable tiny homes? Because our famous answer is it depends on the jurisdiction. So, oh, cool. Harvey says there are a number of allowable surfaces: concrete, asphalt, gravel. That's great. So all of those will have an impact of cost. So let me just go to my other question and answer scenario, which some of these I collected from before. Are tiny homes on wheels considered real property in San Diego? My quick answer is no, because they're known as personal property. However, there is a gentleman that was able to, with the use of permanent foundation systems, to get an ANSI built, which is an RV standard built home, recorded on deed as real property. How that plays a role in assessors and selling your property, I'd like to hear from Genny because you're the resident realtor slash broker. You probably,
It's not real property.
okay, so no, the answer is no. There was some questions about Boxable. None of us are here representing Boxable, but I will say I was shocked, super shocked, when they came out with their certification to an RV standard, when they're very boxy and big and wide, and there's never been wheels that I've seen it. There's also some videos online talking about all kinds of things around fraud and, you know, are people going to get their homes and all that stuff. But none of us here are representing Boxable, as I understand. Genny, Harvey, any insight about that?
No, it's just taken a long time.
Yes, exactly.
Agreed.
When I saw them 2 years ago, they said 1 year. And so we're still waiting. And, you know, I pray for people that put their investment in there, something happens. But my biggest concern is that they're really kind of, the whole building standard that they're dealing with is a little bit interesting. I would like to know more about subdividing residential lots in San Diego. Now, I know about SB9, which gets into, you can take a single family zone lot and put 4 units on it. And then you can subdivide. And there's some great videos online all about SB9, just to be clear. Senate Bill 9.
SB9, it's kind of challenging here in San Diego. I mean, fortunately for us, I was able to attend a great seminar through Impact, Linda Evans' group, Impact SD, and we were able to go through that quite extensively. And it's there's just a lot of challenges with finding the right parcel that will allow you to subdivide.
What was that question about?
I would like to know more about subdividing residential lots in San Diego. I'm assuming is that to put movable tiny homes? Is that, my sense is it's going to be tiny homes on permanent foundation. When you get into subdividing in multiples, the wheels get really tricky unless
Well,
you're an RV park.
You're going to have the density. The density is going to have to allow you to do a subdivided, like if you're trying to do a subdivision or something. We're working on a subdivision up in Roseville that has 44 homes, but it's only, they're only able to do that because of the density in the area. Do you want to elaborate on that, Harvey, and the general plan and all that, kind of like from 50,000 feet up in the air?
And when you go, you're talking about subdividing, there's a lot more to it than just subdividing. Like, you can't just subdivide it and put 2 movable tinies, right? You're only allowed in the city of San Diego. You only can have, currently, you can only have 1. You can't have 2, even if you had enough room to put 50 of them. You only can do, you can only do 1. And so, as Genny was mentioning, you know, the density has to be there. There are a number of rules. There's so many people out there that want to help. We can't even begin to tell you. I mean, we've had so many people approach us with so much available space, but it gets really tricky when you're dealing with the jurisdictions and what they can do. I know the county right now is really, like Genny had went over earlier, is doing a ton of amazing things that are hopefully open it up, and then other jurisdictions will see that, and then hopefully we're hoping that deluge happens where it just opens up everywhere.
The best thing to do is help us in advocacy. And if you
Yes.
have any questions in the meantime, Harvey's really good to do the research on any property that you're looking at.
Yeah, and that is gold. Because do you know how many years it's been like, good luck on your property and figuring out what you need to do with it. It's a big journey. So to have someone in the trenches having figure out all these, you know, weird things, right? Building standards, zoning laws, they have to talk to each other. Unless you want to go under the radar and deal with the consequences. So awesome. Harvey's email is right there. Another really interesting question that comes up a lot, and I'm sure Genny and Harvey have gotten this question, so I've kind of found a way to answer it. If you do a movable tiny home, you place it on the ground, take off the wheels, is it considered voila, permanent? It was built to a standard, it will always be built to that standard. You can just take wheels off all day long, but it doesn't change the standard in which it was built to. Is that different than what
you're not supposed to remove, in the city of San Diego, you're not supposed to remove the wheels from the movable tiny. They're meant to stay on there. I know that there are jurisdictions and there are folks that have taken them off. And if you own one, I'm not going to tell you you can't take them off, but I don't believe you're supposed to, nor are you allowed to in the city of San Diego.
So I think a lot of people ask like, oh, it's just that easy, get the home, take off the wheels, and now it's voila. No, unfortunately, that's not the case. Here's one for you, Genny. Do you have to renew the DMV registration of a movable tiny home every year like you do your car?
Because being in the space that I've been in for many years, it depends, like we've gotten different answers from different places. DMV is like, depending on who you get, like some people will tell you, oh, you can just, say it's inoperable or whatever. But what I've come to know, and just the experience in dealing with parks, and because that's really where you're gonna be faced with, that is more of the park owner and what they require. So, I mean, honestly, it is a very great answer, but technically they are supposed to register it every year because it's still looked at as a vehicle. You have to register it. So that's the answer. It's gray.
There's another part, because I'm involved in Mendocino County, very much what Genny talked about early on, that when, the city of Los Angeles and other big cities passed these ordinances, it sent messages to other counties and cities that just were able to just see what was going on in the government world. And that's what happened in Mendocino County, my home turf, where Supervisor Williams just all of a sudden put it up on the agenda with none of us to help him. When a friend of mine called me and said, they're talking about tiny homes, sure enough, there was all kinds of like, what's the definition? No one could answer it because there wasn't anyone to help them along. So I got immediately into the mix, brought in Dan Fitzpatrick, helped them within 1 month. When they brought it back on the agenda, they had all their answers in a nice, wonderful briefing document that Dan put together. So, it's really great to answer these questions already kind of preloaded, which is why we're doing these Go Tiny seminars, so that people can really get these questions answered. So that if you do DIY, which I don't recommend, your own permitting, your own installation and all that stuff, but if you do, then you've got more knowledge going into it. Like, don't be calling them up and saying, I need a tiny home permit, stuff like that. Okay, so another great one for you, Genny. When reselling the tiny home, do you also need to transfer DMV registration? And how do you make sure it goes through and is fully transferred? Sounds like a car.
It's just like a car. I mean, that's really all you can do.
You get your
title, you turn it around, you write the name. I know a way that you can know that it's done is you walk it in.
Is there an industry standard for warranties of the movable tiny home manufacturing? That's a Genny question.
It depends on the factory that's building it. I mean, the state law is 1 year across the board.
Yeah.
So there are parks, or excuse me, not parks, but there are factories that will offer extended warranties. The most that I've seen is 10 years on a modular, and then 7 years on a park model, but it's a limited park warranty.
And Regina, kind of as a follow-up question, doesn't taking the wheels off affect the type of financing you can get? Really, the financing is connected to the fact that the builder is building it to a very specific certification, and that financer will then approve that builder or dealer that they're working with, especially in the case of 21st Mortgage. And the wheels thing, you're definitely not taking off the wheels if you're doing financing.
If you're talking about a movable tiny home, which is built to ANSI standard, like Harvey mentioned earlier, it's not, the wheels aren't supposed to come off. So, but if you're talking about an ADU or even a prefab unit, the wheels do come off and you can make it a permanent structure. And that's how you get financing, but it's a different type of financing. It's more HUD financing.
And to that point, with regard to taking the wheels off and leaving the wheels on, for the latter, for the actual manufactured home that's going to sit on, it has to sit on a permanent foundation. I know we're going through some financing conditions, and one of those was making sure that the home is going to sit on permanent foundation. So the type of foundation you utilize is critical to some financing institutions.
So this one's interesting. I was talking with a builder in Arizona going to purchase a home And they found out I lived in California, said I couldn't sell to me as a restriction California has that will make it hard for me to purchase from a builder out of state.
There's a couple of things that are tied to that. Some builders don't want to sell to folks that are going to go out of state for the warranty and the servicing that's involved. So they won't be able to service it. Some builders will do that, and they'll just find someone in that area that they can, contract with to service that unit.
Jenny's right. I got a broken window. I got a problem with the toilet, and now they need to find someone local. And this is something I learned from you, Genny, all about that reality. Whereas a lot of builders like, we can ship anywhere. You want to make sure you ask the question, are you going to come out and fix the thing? And I've talked to so many dealers of all kinds of homes. It is unlikely that home will be 100% perfect. Right, Genny? Have you dealt with those kind of issues?
I've never seen 100% perfect, but as long as you have a good dealer that'll help take care of it, it doesn't need to be 100% perfect.
And she said the word dealers, many people are buying direct from builders. As someone, for my own journey, our builder went out of business in the middle of the build. So there was no warranty. There was come and pick up your unfinished tiny home. It's outside, ready to hook it up. I mean, that was our situation. So.
And Genny, I wanted to add this, and correct me if I'm wrong. If you're buying a unit out of state, don't you have to make sure that it is certified by an approved institution? Because I know the state in California, there are certain ones that are approved.
Okay, so every state has rules. And so for example, one of my factories, they are really particular on, wanting to take or wanting to build a unit that's going to go out of state, because they have to make sure that for that state that their rules are going, they're going to build that unit. So I recently had a situation where someone was wanting to, at the very end, literally they were paying that day. They said, oh, we're going to go to Oregon. And so the factory kind of knew that they assumed that person was trying to avoid taxes. So they're like, okay, well, we need to build it, stronger. We got to put another axle on it. So, and that's what they were using. They were using the fact that because of that state, we have to build it a different way. So it just is all dependent on the details, where it's going to go. Some builders don't care at all. They're like, fine, they don't care if it goes, to Michigan. But it's just really, at the end of the day, I look at it as being more of a builder situation where they're their rules.
Okay, here's a good finance question. I'm getting a loan to purchase my tiny home. Does the bank put a lien on the tiny house like they would if I was purchasing a traditional house?
Well, it's just like a car. So they're going to own that title until you pay it off.
You don't get this piece of paper.
Yeah, if you want to look at that as being a lien, you could technically, but it's not like a lien on a house.
No, because it's personal property, not real property. So this is a cool, I live in San Diego County. What risk am I taking by moving forward with parking a tiny home on my property? If the law has not been passed yet, there's a fine. Do I have to move it? Are there other consequences? And this is a really good question because this kind of goes under the radar situation. Who wants to take that one?
I'll take it. And Harvey, you can jump in. So in the county, you can do a healthcare permit. So we'd love to talk to you about how that might fit for you, because it's the easiest permit in the world to get. It's over the counter. And because we'd mentioned that we know that San Diego is definitely working on the movable tiny, outside of the healthcare permit. I tell people that we're working with, I let them know that that's, this is what's going on. And, it's up to you what you want to do at the end of the day, because we're not the permit police, but this is what is allowed. We do know that the county is very seriously working on it though. And so all that, when you get a violation on the property, they'll come out and they'll tell you, move it. And then if you don't abide by what they ask, then you start to accumulate fees.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what's just happened in Sonoma County. And there was a giant petition, 3,000 people signed because these people were getting, they got the like, okay, you got to move it. Then they didn't move it. Then there were fines assessed. All those things were happening. And then they actually got the supervisors to budge and pass it. So Sonoma County, it's still a temporary one, but they've definitely made some amendments for a pump out contract and also compost toilets as long as they're NSF certified. So kind of 2 steps forward, couple steps back. This is a really good one. Diana asked about her RV park that she was asked to leave with her tiny home, which was an 8x20 because they called it a park model and it was not permitted because the manufacturer says, or the park model, sorry, it was not permitted because the park model is 10 feet wide. What she described needed to be 10 feet wide. So my sense is that could be a zoning thing that they are required, or it could also just be a park thing because I've been told to leave just because they had certain feelings about tiny homes.
Yeah, to me, that's just more of a park, like what they want in their park, their rules.
Right.
So I mean, maybe you can call it discrimination, but I don't really want to call it discrimination because I don't know everything else, but I think it could be.
I did deal with a situation where I went to an RV park, saw a converted bus. They told me, no, they don't allow tiny homes. Did a little drive-by because it was in Oceanside. I wanted to live there so bad. And I noticed a converted Greyhound, like a big, what do you call them? The tour coaches. And I'm like, I know something about those, or there's no certification for that. So if there was a park saying only these things are allowed and this kind of certification. So I nicely called them on it, showed them pictures of my tiny home. They got back to me and said, your home is approved. So don't take no unless in this situation when they're like very clearly telling you because your width and all that kind of stuff, it won't fit in. But I was able to turn a no into a yes because of the other sort of scenarios of other homes that were there. So, that's a good question. If you ship out of state, do you save the taxes if it's built in California? That's a good Genny question.
Oh, and I know why. Hi, Stephanie. Okay, so I have found out more information on that. I was just mentioning someone that this is so weird that I know your situation that someone we were right at the very end and they were trying to flip it to go to Oregon because he's saying his dad lived there. And he was only trying to do that to avoid the taxes. And the Silvercrest, they pretty much caught wind of it and they said, okay, fine, Genny, then he needs to get new axles, new all this and this and that. So besides that, there is a way that you can avoid the taxes when you are moving out of state. But what I'm seeing is that there are other steps that have to be taken. So California knows that people do that a lot with cars. And so there are some extra forms that do need to be filled out.
And then this question from Chris, when people say people can't remove the wheels of a park model RV and put the unit in the backyard, is that only for San Diego? Or is it widely recognized rule? And why do the cities against the idea of removing the wheels? So this is a continued question.
I think as it pertains to removing the wheels, I think one of the biggest challenges is the standard by which movable tiny homes are built, and then say like a manufactured home. Although that's changing now, tiny home builders are building closer to the California building code. I think that's where the challenge might lie. It's because in LA, I know that movable tiny homes are seen as ADUs. And I would assume if it's built to the proper code, then you could remove the wheels, but I think it's gonna fall more on that, on whether or not like the standard by which it's built, because these aren't built to the California building code per se, right? A movable tiny home or a park model are built to.
Some of them will allow you to take them off, but they are not saying, that you're like taking the chassis off and all that with it,
Right.
But they'll tell you can remove them. And what people will do is just put them underneath and have it skirted. But for the most part, it's a standard thing. They're built to ANSI and they're not supposed to come off.
what I think might be happening when folks want to remove the wheels, what they're probably trying to do is bring the profile of the unit down. And so what Genny recommends, and I've seen this recommended a few times, is going with what's called a pit set, where they kind of dig out the ground and almost imagine a pool, a really shallow pool, and then backing the unit down into that lowered area, so that way it has a lower profile. So that's a way that some folks have tried to work around.
Manufactured home to HUD standards. That's not ANSI. So just be
Oh.
careful.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 4. I teach this all the time. The 4 types of tiny homes, the NFPA, ANSI are the RV standards. Then there's International Residential Code. And in our world, built in a factory, arrives on wheels, placed on foundation, pretty much seen as if it was built like on site. And then there's manufactured HUD homes, which is what I learned about from Genny. And Genny actually is certified to sell both residential and commercial HUD housing. Woo, we did it. I don't see any more questions in the chat. It's 5:35. I feel like we've come here, we've given a lot of education, and please get in touch with whoever you felt really inspired by. Definitely become an advocate in support. All of you that are in that local area of Southern California, more support is needed. We be tired down there. We've been working hard, right? Genny, Harvey, Ellen.
Yeah.
We need to see things happen at the state levels. Tiny homes and the small home movement is here to stay, is not a trend. The big home movement has already been there, done that. And we're not going to build ourselves in these large homes out of our housing crisis and our sustainability crisis. So let's go make things happen. And reach out to Rebuilding Green. If you've got property, anyone here that's got property, make it happen with them. And I'm here available as well. So thank you all.
Yeah, and we love to see you on June 23rd.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks,
Thank you
Lindsay.
guys.